The auditorium of a local high school in Austin, Texas, was buzzing with excitement. Elon Musk had agreed to visit the school for a special Q&A session with teachers and students to discuss the future of technology and innovation. The energy in the room was electric. Musk's presence had drawn not only educators and students but also parents and local leaders eager to hear from one of the world's most visionary minds. Elon, dressed in a casual blazer and jeans, took the stage to roaring applause. His confident but unassuming demeanor immediately put the crowd at ease. After delivering a short speech about the importance of innovation and embracing change, he opened the floor for questions. The first few questions were predictable. Students asking about space exploration, Tesla, and AI, while teachers sought advice on integrating technology into the classroom. Musk answered each question thoughtfully, often injecting a bit of humor to keep the atmosphere light. Then, a middle-aged woman in a modest dress stood up, clutching a notebook tightly to her chest. Her name was Mrs. Carter, a high school science teacher with over 20 years of experience. Her voice carried a mixture of determination and frustration as she asked her question. "Mr. Musk," she began, her tone steady, "as a teacher, I've spent my life trying to prepare students for the future. But with the rapid pace of technological advancement, I sometimes wonder, are we doing enough? What do you believe is the future of education? And how can we make sure we're preparing our kids for a world that's changing so fast?" The room fell silent. It wasn't a question about rockets or electric cars. It was a question that went straight to the heart of the audience. The teachers in the room nodded subtly, their faces reflecting the same concerns Mrs. Carter had voiced. Musk paused for a moment, his expression thoughtful. He leaned slightly against the podium, his eyes scanning the crowd before settling back on Mrs. Carter. "That's a great question," he said finally, his tone earnest. "And it's one I think about a lot." What he said next would leave the room speechless. Elon Musk took a deep breath, his gaze steady as he began to respond. "The future of education," he said, "isn't just about teaching kids facts or preparing them for specific careers. It's about teaching them how to think. The world is changing so fast that the jobs they're training for today might not even exist in 10 or 20 years. So, the real question isn't, are we teaching enough? It's, are we teaching the right skills?" The room was silent, every face in the audience focused intently on Musk as he continued. "I believe education needs to evolve in 3 critical ways," he said. "First, we need to focus on critical thinking and problem solving. It's not enough to memorize information anymore. Kids need to learn how to analyze, question, and innovate. Because in a world driven by AI and automation, the ability to solve complex problems will set people apart." Musk began to pace slightly, his voice growing more animated. "Second," he said, "we need to make learning hands-on and experiential. When I was a kid, I learned the most when I was building things, experimenting, and failing. That's why companies like SpaceX and Tesla prioritize engineers who know how to build and troubleshoot, not just those with fancy degrees. Students should be building things, solving real-world problems, and learning by doing, not just sitting in classrooms taking notes." The teachers in the room exchanged glances, nodding subtly. Musk's words resonated deeply with many of them, especially those who had long advocated for more hands-on learning in schools. "And third," Musk said, pausing for emphasis, "we need to personalize education. Every student is different. Some learn best through reading, others through hands-on activities, and some thrive in collaborative environments. Technology can help us create customized learning paths for each student, so they're not just keeping up, they're excelling." Mrs. Carter, still standing, leaned forward slightly, her notebook in hand. "But Mr. Musk," she interjected, "how do we make that happen in underfunded schools? Not every district has access to cutting-edge technology or the resources to implement these ideas." Musk nodded, acknowledging the challenge. "You're right," he said, "and that's the biggest obstacle we face. It's not about what's possible, it's about making it accessible. That's why I believe we need a public-private partnership. Companies like Tesla, SpaceX, and others in the tech world need to step up and work with schools. We can donate resources, provide training for teachers, and create platforms that bring cutting-edge tools into every classroom, not just the well-funded ones. The audience erupted into applause at this, inspired by Musk's vision. Mrs. Carter's expression softened, and she smiled for the first time, feeling a sense of hope she hadn't felt in years. But Musk wasn't finished yet. Elon Musk raised his hand slightly, signaling for the applause to settle. The room quieted, and he leaned back against the podium, his expression thoughtful. "But," he said, his voice softer now, "it's not just about technology or funding. The heart of education is the teachers. You, Mrs. Carter, and everyone in this room who dedicates their lives to shaping the future. Technology can enhance education, but it can never replace the human connection between a teacher and a student. That connection is what inspires kids to dream, to push themselves, and to believe they can achieve more." The room seemed to exhale collectively, the teachers exchanging glances filled with pride and recognition. Musk continued, his tone almost personal now. "When I was a kid, there was a teacher who encouraged my curiosity. I was the kid who asked too many questions, who stayed late after class to talk about science and space. Instead of dismissing me, she listened. She didn't have all the answers, but she made me feel like my questions mattered. That belief she had in me, that's something no AI or piece of technology can replicate." Mrs. Carter's grip on her notebook loosened, and a soft smile spread across her face. Around her, other teachers nodded, visibly moved by Musk's words. "Here's the thing," Musk said, his voice growing more passionate. "The world needs dreamers, inventors, and problem solvers. But those people don't just appear out of nowhere. They're shaped by the guidance of teachers. That's why we need to give you the tools and resources to do what you do best. It's not just about creating better schools. It's about creating better futures." He paused for a moment, letting his words sink in before addressing the entire audience. "I know change takes time, and it's not always easy, but if we can inspire just one kid to believe in their potential, to think beyond their circumstances, then we're already winning. Because that one kid could grow up to solve the world's biggest problems, or maybe just bring joy to the people around them. Either way, it's worth it." The applause started slowly, then grew louder and louder, filling the room with energy and hope. Teachers, students, and parents alike clapped, some even standing, as Musk's vision for the future of education resonated deeply. Mrs. Carter, still standing, wiped a tear from the corner of her eye. "Thank you, Mr. Musk," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "for reminding us why we do this." Musk smiled warmly, nodding at her. "Thank you for everything you do," he replied. "You're the real heroes." But just as the applause began to die down, Musk leaned forward, a glint of excitement in his eyes. "Actually," he said, "there's one more thing I'd like to share." The room fell silent again, the energy palpable as everyone waited for what Elon Musk would say next. He stepped away from the podium slightly, his hands gesturing animatedly as he began. "I've been thinking a lot about how we can accelerate the future of education," he said, his voice brimming with excitement. "And one of the biggest challenges is making cutting-edge tools and resources accessible to everyone, not just a privileged few. So, starting today, I'm launching a new initiative, Project Future Minds." The crowd erupted into murmurs of curiosity, the teachers leaning forward in their seats. Musk raised his hand, silencing the room with ease. "This initiative will focus on bringing advanced technology, like AI-powered learning tools and hands-on STEM kits, to schools in underserved communities. And we're not stopping there. We're also going to provide funding for teacher training programs so educators like Mrs. Carter can continue to inspire the next generation." The room broke into applause, but Musk wasn't done. "We'll also be creating scholarships for students who show exceptional potential in science, technology, and innovation, because talent shouldn't go unnoticed just because a kid doesn't have the means." The applause grew louder, and several teachers stood, clapping enthusiastically. Mrs. Carter was among them, her face a mix of astonishment and gratitude. She clutched her notebook tightly to her chest, as though holding onto the weight of the moment. Musk smiled, clearly energized by the crowd's reaction. "But here's the thing," he said, his voice rising slightly. "I can't do this alone. This has to be a collective effort. We need teachers, parents, community leaders, and businesses to come together to make this vision a reality. Education isn't just an investment in students. It's an investment in our future." The applause swelled again, echoing throughout the auditorium. Teachers nodded to one another, many already brainstorming how they could bring these opportunities to their schools. Musk turned to Mrs. Carter, his expression soft but sincere. "Mrs. Carter," he said, "you asked if we're doing enough to prepare our kids for the future. I don't think we are, not yet. But with people like you leading the way, I know we can." Mrs. Carter's eyes glistened with tears as she stepped forward slightly. "Thank you, Mr. Musk," she said, her voice trembling. "Not just for this initiative, but for believing in us, in our students." Musk nodded, his smile wide. "Believing in you is the easiest part," he said. "You're shaping the minds that will solve tomorrow's problems." The auditorium buzzed with energy as the applause gradually faded. Elon Musk stepped back from the podium, allowing the significance of his announcement to settle over the room. Teachers exchanged inspired looks, students whispered excitedly, and even the local officials in attendance seemed moved by the vision Musk had laid out. Mrs. Carter, still holding her notebook tightly, found herself approached by Musk. He extended his hand, and she shook it, her eyes still shining with emotion. "Thank you for everything you do," he said warmly. "Teachers like you are the backbone of this initiative." "You've given us hope," Mrs. Carter replied, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "It's easy to feel overwhelmed, to feel like we're not doing enough. But tonight, you've reminded me why we keep going." Musk smiled, his gaze filled with respect. "Your work is the reason kids like me grow up to dream big. The world needs more teachers like you." The crowd around them seemed to share the sentiment, with other teachers and students gathering close, eager to ask questions and share their thoughts. Musk spent the next several minutes speaking with them one-on-one, his approachable demeanor making the room feel smaller, more connected. As the event began to wind down, the excitement carried outside the auditorium. News of Project Future Minds quickly spread, with social media lighting up with clips and quotes from Musk's speech. Teachers from across the country chimed in, sharing their stories and expressing hope for what the initiative could bring to their schools. Before leaving, Musk turned back to the stage for one final remark. Standing in front of the audience, now more like a community than a crowd, he said, "This isn't just about the future of education. It's about the future of humanity. If we invest in our kids, if we invest in our teachers, there's no problem we can't solve. Together, we'll build a world where everyone has the chance to thrive." The room erupted into a standing ovation, cheers and applause echoing through the space. Musk waved one last time before stepping off the stage, leaving behind a room full of educators and students who felt inspired, empowered, and ready to take on the future. As the lights dimmed and the crowd began to disperse, Mrs. Carter stood quietly by the stage, watching as students and teachers excitedly discussed the possibilities ahead. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that the work she did mattered, that it truly made a difference. For Elon Musk, it was just another step in his lifelong mission to improve the world. But for the teachers and students in that auditorium, it was a moment they would carry with them forever. A reminder that the future of education wasn't just a distant dream but something they could begin building together, one classroom at a time.